Adobe over ABC.
All right, I think we're about to begin.
We're like, we have to sit down with you guys. And blah, blah, blah. So I think Sean, I think was.
I said I think we're about to
I'll tell you
begin.
who I sent a note to.
Alex?
Oh, sorry. Hi. Hi, everybody.
So I want to welcome you to our panel this afternoon here at Digital Hollywood. It has the very descriptive title of Ultimate TV, the OTT cross-platform multi-screen experience navigated by set-top, mobile device, or console. And so, as you could probably sense, what we're going to be talking about is the world of video viewing, which continues to evolve, providing a whole variety of new means to distribute and consume content, as well as a whole array of new offerings to receive that content, either through entrenched established services or new services, and with the entrenched ones, as well providing some of the new business models to try to capture those viewers that are not currently subscribing to what they do, as well as trying to reduce the threat of those leaving them for some of these exciting alternative ways to watch content. All of that, though, comes with a challenge, too, because with the ever-growing array of content offerings through over-the-top means, as well as cable and broadcast television, for that matter. HD has certainly added a whole wide array of television program options for those who don't want to pay for anything. It does create greater choice, and sometimes too much choice can really create confusion and stagnate adoption of anything, because how do I choose between this and this and this and this? So it's an exciting area. I think ultimately people are figuring out what to do. We also have on our panel a very interesting service that will help guide those who are currently paralyzed by choice in trying to decide how to go about enjoying and watching their content in the new world that's here. So, my name is David Leibowitz. I'm managing partner of CH Potomac. It's basically my holding company. I have interest in a variety of digital media companies. Used to be a lawyer, but don't hold that against me, as well as having had a lot of fun in my life and like to continue to do that. I will introduce the panelists, but I wanted to at least lay out some of the changes or statistics that's going on that's affecting the marketplace, and that will lead more naturally into what we're going to be talking about. I also want to welcome the audience that is not here in the room, as well as welcoming those that are in the room, because we are being webcast. And so there will be people watching this live, as well as it's going to be archived and available later on. So welcome to all of you. So cord cutting continues to accelerate. And in fact, maybe I should ask of those in the room, how many of you have cut the cord and no longer have a cable type service? So I'd say for those that can't see, that's around 35–40% of the room. How many of you are cord nevers that have never had service, other than when you live home with your parents or things like that? We have no cord nevers here. How many of you are cord stackers? And what I mean by cord stackers are, in addition to having a cable service, you also subscribe to some over-the-top services, either pay or as supported. And so we have, around 40% of cord stackers here. So cord cutting, though, has been accelerating, continues to do so. So in Q2 of this year, Leichtman Research Group said that every major cable TV and satellite company lost subscribers during the second quarter of the year. A total net video subscriber losses of 665,000, which is more than double the number that they lost just 2 years ago. And so that continues to accelerate. Having said that, cable and satellite companies still dominate with almost 94 million subscribers. So they could probably go for a number of quarters without doing anything and, still have a pretty nice cash flow. but nevertheless will continue to raise concerns because those numbers could radically change as people are adopting other means or as people are looking at the reasons why they're cutting their cords, which are primarily because of availability of the video that you can get on the internet through over-the-top services. The price increases that steadily sneak into your bill, and if they do it gradually or at the end of certain free promotions, and lo and behold, you have more than you're paying, as well as the fact that through J.D. Powers and other customer service ratings services, cable and satellite is still viewed very poorly as a rated service. So that combines with that. Now, in terms of what I was asking all of you about, in July of this year, GfK did a study that was not broken down by age group that indicated that 25% of the U.S. TV households live without cable or satellite TV. And 17% of the households rely only on broadcast reception, which is up from 15% last year. For those that are watching internet services, this study says, which I thought was kind of low, is 6% of U.S. households are using only internet services. I guess when you look at it only, maybe not, and that includes Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, and YouTube, with no pay TV offerings and no broadcast offerings. And that's actually a 50% jump from 2015. When you break it down from demographics, though, you really see how millennials and younger viewers are opting out of the pay TV, digital cable, satellite environment. So of 18 to 34-year-olds, 38% of those rely on alternative video service offerings. And 22% are using only broadcast. 13% are only watching internet delivered. But that 38% is a big number and is continuing to grow. On the other hand, when you look at those over 50, there are far more that still subscribe to pay TV. And in fact, 46% have a cable TV subscription if you're over 50, compared to 41% overall. There have been some recent announcements. There's a Next TV conference going on in New York simultaneously with this conference, where PlayStation View announced that 2/3 of its audience are millennials, and that 1/4 of their subs are new to the PlayStation View, new to PlayStation altogether. And that's a service that's $75 a month. So at least they're able to be paying. Those are nicely compensated millennials. Let's put it that way. Cord cutting, though, isn't perfect. As I mentioned before, I talked about cord stackers. J.D. Power and Associates reports that consumer satisfaction scores are greatest for cord stackers. And cord cutters have different concerns than the reasons why they cut the cord. And those include customer care and value. So customer care is whether or not, if you're getting an IPTV delivery, the quality of the signal changes, and depending on what device you are and where you are, that could affect that, as well as the value, because in many cases those prices are going up as well. And because of all that, it's led to the advent of skinny bundles, which are efforts that originally started with cable MSOs to offer not just the 100 or 300 channel packages, but try to narrow it down to like 20 channels that would be the most attractive to certain demos, especially those that they think they're losing, like the millennial demo, for a lower price. And in fact, there's been lawsuits resulting from that. ESPN was not happy about that because of how they structure their business, and many others that have an advertiser-supported side as well as a subscription fee side, and how that complicates what they're doing. So while it was intended to sort of reach and those that could be potentially cord cutters, as well as the potential young consumers that are currently cord nevers, they're not really jumping to those services. And ironically, skinny bundles have been most interesting, at least those being offered by cable, to those that are 50 years or older. And so it's raising some interesting questions about how it operates in that environment, in contrast to some of the skinny bundles that are available through Sling TV and other offerings. Now, PlayStation View is not one of them, which competes with Sling TV, but some of them are looking at that approach. YouTube Unplugged is one that's going to be coming out next year. They recently announced a deal with CBS and really pointed to the Big Bang Theory as part of that offering because of the ability of that program to reach millennials. They're now negotiating with Fox, NBC, Universal, and Disney for both the Disney and ABC offerings. And they plan on offering it as a skinny bundle for somewhere between $24 and $40 a month. You know, at the same time, DirecTV Now reported just yesterday that it's not going to be planning on any skinny bundles in their offerings. They will be offering more than 100 channels of live and on-demand programming targeted to younger viewers, but at a higher price point. And we'll see how that is. And one final point, you know, I mentioned how on the cable side it seems to be the 50-year-olds that are more interested in the skinny bundles. Well, notwithstanding, Lowell McAdam, who's the CEO of Verizon, which also has Verizon Fios, expressed his preference for selling skinny bundles exclusively, rather than making up the 300-channel bundle. And that 40% of the company's volume is already on skinny bundles. And, you know, so, you know, that's an interesting part. How that's going to affect their overall revenues going forward is, you know, a big question. So, with that background, and yes, I haven't forgotten you guys, but with that background, I mean, our panel is really focused on the devices, the technologies, the infrastructure to help facilitate you all and others navigating, and navigation's a good word, through this environment, how you receive your programming, what's going on in that area that's pro-consumer, that what's going on that may not be necessarily pro-consumer, and how you're going to be getting your content today and tomorrow from set-top boxes, consoles, Roku, Chromecast, Amazon Fire Sticks, Apple TV devices, as well as your iOS and Android devices on an app basis. So with that, let me begin to introduce my panel. And I'm going to first introduce everybody and then ask Virginia, and going down the line, to just briefly talk about who you are, what you do, and why is this an exciting space to you. So I'm going to start with Virginia Giuliano, who's CEO and founder of a company called Cobblecord, which is one of these new services that I mentioned earlier. Virginia's background is also from the pay cable side, having many years spent at Showtime Networks. Next to Dan, I don't know if I want to call you a veteran, because I don't know how you'll feel about that, but...
Or a fossil.
No, you're not a fossil. No, Robin's the fossil. No, I'm just kidding. You know, but Dan is a veteran in the equipment and the set-top box marketplace, as well as a very interesting history long before that. He is VP of Sales and Marketing at Nevelex Corp. Next to Dan is Alex Dressin, who's president for North America for Massive Interactive. And Alex will tell you all about what Massive is up to. Then we have Campbell Foster, who is director of product marketing for video solutions at Adobe. And so you're going to be saying, well, how does Adobe play in this space? You know, Campbell will be telling you about that. It's much more in terms of some of their solutions that help facilitate what consumers are seeing and watching, and how they help guide the developments in that area. And guide is probably a pun intended, but I hadn't thought about it originally. And then we have the youthful Robin Wilson, who is VP of Business Development at Nagra, who also has an extensive career in this area, dealing with a lot of rights management issues, standard setting on the technologies, and has a tremendous amount of knowledge and information to convey there. And last but not least is T.K. Arnold, and T.K. is publisher and editorial director for Home Media Magazine. And as such, he's one of the leading home entertainment journalists in the U.S. And so he will be able to bring us a 50,000-foot view, and maybe a little higher or a little lower, depending on where we wind up. So with that, let me first turn it over to Virginia and tell us what's going on with you and Cobblecord.
Thank you. So, Virginia Giuliano. I spent 10 years at Showtime Networks doing subscriber acquisition and distributor marketing. And I left about a year ago I had this idea to help people figure out how to cut the cord. People in my business, and we lived and breathed it, were confused about all of the options out there. And there's new OTT services launching every single day. The choices are overwhelming. So I really felt that there was a need in the marketplace to help guide people who are either on the cord-cutting fence, who need a little help, a little hand-holding, or if they've already cut the cord, there's so many available, both free and paid options that people are not aware of it. So it's sort of a centralized repository of all this information, and it helps educate, empower, and enable people to make the best entertainment decision for them and to have an active role in the management of their entertainment, which is a totally different world than we are used to, where it was sort of like set it and forget it entertainment with your cable company. But now there's a lot more options, a lot more freedom to come and go, to subscribe when there's a show that you like in season and unsubscribe when it's off season, or if you just notice that you haven't been watching a service that you pay for. So it's constantly, the power is now in the consumer's hands much more than ever before. And I think that a lot of consumers don't even realize it yet. And it's a little overwhelming. So a service like Cobblecord will help to alleviate that.
My name's Dan Sweeney. I'm the Vice President of Sales Marketing with Nevelex. Nevelex is a software engineering services company. It's headquartered in Minnesota. We have an office here in Los Angeles. And when I say software engineering service, we basically have a lot of smart engineers that focus in the digital video media space and IoT embedded system space. So we do project work for companies like AT&T, DirecTV, and a few others as well. Some of the projects, just real quickly, that we have focused on is, for example, live 4K streaming to high-end set-top boxes at DirecTV, smart TV application integration, again at Direct, and wireless set-top box solutions within a consumer household. Personally, I've been in the industry for decades, and my career has bounced around a little bit, but always in this space. It's always been fun. I basically started when CNN started, just to give you a sense of how long I've been in it. In software engineering for 10 years and with working for some customers, including Ultraviolet, TiVo, DirecTV, GoPro, companies like that. Also BuzzTime with interactive multiplayer games. Content discovery through Gemstar TV Guide, pay TV through Showtime, and worked for a few cable companies way back when we were hustling 36 channels of television. So that's my background. And just real quick, David asked us to say, if there are three things we'd like to convey to the audience, and there are three areas that I assume we'll touch on, or I certainly will, is the proliferation of OTT services is really increasing consumer confusion. And how do these services really differentiate? So, and that's where you're going to come in pretty handy with some of your viewpoints. And also, the devices in the ecosystem continue to be fragmented. Will standardization clear up that problem? And then finally, viewing quality and higher definition viewing with 4K, HDR. There's talk of 8K and some demos that are going on with that. VR. How are these going to play a role going forward, and in both mobile and fixed TV, big screens in your home? So that's what I'd like to focus on. Go ahead.
Great.
Hi, sorry, I'm Alex Dressin. Good to be here, thanks. I head up the North American operations for a company called Massive, which has its headquarters out of London. I've been with the company for about 4.5 years now, and the company itself is focused on a very specific area within the OTT stack. and that is building very sophisticated applications. And also manipulating what we call the front-end UI. So giving content companies, telcos, broadcasters, we only deal primarily with companies in the tier 1 space, the ability to ultimately market their product and their content in a different way. And as I'm sure you've seen, most of the apps that turn up on your phones or on your tablets or on your smart TVs or your game consoles have a rather rigid environment. And what we do is we give flexibility to that environment on the front end. So we work neutrally with OVPs across the board, and we're sort of like the last bit of the stack, but ultimately giving you, I think, we're able to give the content company a very different perspective of how they can think ahead and market to their customer. And I think more and more as the discussion comes up around advertising and subscription, SVOD versus AVOD, what we're looking at and what's sort of exciting to me in the space right now is ultimately hybrids where brands are able to incorporate themselves and manipulate themselves within the UI itself. So we're not just talking about this traditional mid-roll, pre-roll type of conversation, but ultimately how do you render and garner hopefully a higher CPM by integrating yourself in a very unique fashion across all devices. So that's sort of us in a nutshell, but we'll get into it further. Yeah.
Thanks, Alex. Campbell?
Hi, thanks, David. Thanks to all of you for coming. My name is Campbell Foster, and I run product marketing for Adobe Primetime. So Primetime is part of the Marketing Cloud, and we provide video playback, ad insertion, DRM recommendations, monetization platform, and authentication. So we do all the TV Everywhere authentication when you download and install a program or app like NBC Sports Live Extra and you have to enter your Comcast credentials or whatever. That's our product. So I've been at the company for about 5 years. I was at Google before that doing ad tech stuff, so definitely have an ad tech slant in my background. And that's what I'm here to talk about.
Great. Thank you.
So I'm Robin Wilson. I'm from Nagra. It's a Swiss-based international company founded on actually audio for the studios many years ago, but in the last 15 years or more, it's been focused on content security for digital TV, and that includes conditional access, which the MVPDs, the legacy broadcasters use, DRM, more applicable to over-the-top and home networking, and more recently watermarking as well. So we cover all the various silos of content security and to some extent tracking lost or stolen assets. And we also, out of necessity as much as desire, we integrate a lot of these systems into back-end cloud-based systems to deploy the security mechanisms. And it's a bit of a mess out there in terms of many different DRMs and different devices and different needs. So you cannot uniquely just supply a single DRM. You have to be very multilingual in that area. And in that sense, we do multi-DRM and sourcing the different forms of DRM that are required for different devices. So there's a lot of system-level cloud-based technology. It's pretty much on the technology plane, although there's a little bit on the user experience plane as well that we do supply the some parts of the stack for tablets and set-top boxes.
So would it be fair to say that Nagra sort of benefits through the complexity and incompatibility of these different systems because you have to build more, or?
Well, I wish that was true. Unfortunately, the business model, just from basically competitive pressures, is such that it's always downwards. It's never sideways or upwards like you're suggesting.
Uh-huh.
So it's hard to monetize, what essentially would be professional services, NRE,
Right.
non-return investment on new things. Many of us, we license things on a per instance basis, per transactional basis. You don't get a lot of credit from your customers for making 10 different versions of that. It's hard to, they want to just buy the licenses and say, that's your problem, take care of it.
Right.
So the answer is sadly no, David.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. Well, sorry or I'm sorry, no opinion on that.
We'll buy you lunch, okay?
But this guy is happy to help, yeah.
I got your parking ticket, by the way. Don't worry. On me.
That's right.
And TK, what do you?
My name
what's
is
your
Thomas
thoughts?
K. Arnold, and I'm the publisher and editorial director of Home Media Magazine. We used to be Video Store Magazine, and I've been with them for about 25 years. And our magazine's job and our website and our daily news blasts and everything else is to make sense of what all these people are doing and how it fits into the whole entertainment scope, which boils down to what the consumer really wants and how the consumer wants to view and interact with their entertainment. Years ago, we were the magazine that was read by the 30,000 video rental stores, and we were a way for the studios to communicate what they're doing. Now, things have kind of reversed, and we are the magazine that all the studios read, and we like to talk to you people to tell the studios exactly what you're doing, because the studios still hold the key to the kingdom, which is content. And we also feel a little bit of a proprietary interest in the whole OTT phenomenon because Netflix was born out of our business. I remember being at a conference probably about 15, 16 years ago when Ted Sarandos, who's now the chief content officer of Netflix, and Mitch Lowe, who later went on to form Redbox, were standing on stage with a plastic mailbox and trying to explain the concept of, we're going to mail you a disc so you don't have to go return it to Blockbuster. And then we've watched that whole model grow about how the Netflix model turned from disc rental to, hey, we have an even easier and cheaper method of bringing entertainment to the consumer through the thing called the internet. And of course, it fed into the two primary drivers of consumer habit, which is cheap and easy.
So let's stay on what you were just talking about, because certainly when you started out, it was the home video market, and you still think that there is a place for what you refer to as the owned content market, which in contrast to streaming or just watching your stuff through cable or on demand or what have you, but there's been a big drop in large areas. But do you still see some future for people buying DVDs or having your storage lockers in the cloud, whether it's ultraviolet or what have you? And if so, are there certain formats, genres that seem to be more appealing for that, or are we just seeing that's going to be disappearing?
No, I think ownership is not dead. The concept of ownership, the pressure on the studio since day one has been the proved value of ownership. What is the value of owning something instead of renting it? And if you look back 35 years with the whole controversy over the first sale doctrine, the studios were aghast at video stores taking their movies and renting them on video cassette. But that's because the average consumer just wants to watch the movie. It wasn't a matter of, I want to bring this movie into my home. It's, wow, I'm coming from a universe where first we had 3 channels that I could watch on, then we had 30 cable channels, and now I can go to a video store and see thousands of movies whenever I want to. Which was a very, very important driver for the consumer. The studios back then, they fought them tooth and nail in court because they wanted people to buy their movies. And throughout the years, nothing has changed. Right in the early days, they were up against the video rental stores. Then they were up against Blockbuster. With DVD, they finally had that golden ring. They finally had, because it played into the 2 primary drivers again, cheap and easy. You could buy a D for $15 instead of the $100 it would cost for a movie on video cassette, and you could buy the movie right away. Today, yeah, it's tough. The studios looked at the internet and they looked at streaming, and they had this great idea that, we're going to sell digital downloads. And that's going to be a huge business, and we're going to still be able to sell our movies and our TV shows, but we don't have to worry about shipping, about returns, about manufacturing. Well, the problem is the value proposition. Picture yourself at Christmas. There's something magical about opening up a wrapped present and finding like a box set of a TV series. Somebody says, I got you a download for Christmas, doesn't have the romantic appeal. So the way the studios got around that originally was to have an early release window. They would push out and make it available on EST as a download 3 weeks before the movie came out on disc. Well, and you saw a brief moment where you saw double-digit gains in EST, but this year it's dropped to about 8% growth. It's still a tiny blip, and meanwhile, disc sales are half what they were 10 years ago. And yet, is the business dead? Is the model dead? No. They just have to find a way to bring the value back in and get people to value ownership again.
You know, I thanks for that. I know, Virginia, you want to comment. You know, it brings to mind, I mean, when I think of my Bluray Player, which also is a connected TV, a connected player, and I think many people are using their connected Blu-ray players not to be watching the discs, but just yet another avenue to Netflix and Amazon and the other services. But I mean, it's a big challenge, and you've explained a lot of that.
One big thing, if I can just interject one more thing, is we're lazy. And I see it to myself. I mean, I've got 3 good Blu-ray movies, you know, that have just come in that I can't see anywhere else. But I'm sitting on the couch with my glass of Korean Baeksujeon wine, and I don't want to get off the couch. So what's on Netflix? So instead of watching the new Iron Man movie, I'm watching Lifetime movie.
Or you could just talk to your remote control on Amazon or Roku or what have you and just...
I haven't gotten there yet.
Okay. Virginia, you had a comment there.
I mean, that's exactly where I was going, is that what is lost in the DVD, the material object, is gained with impulse buy and also laziness, as you said. And there's a lot of services that, you know, iTunes, for instance, with Apple TV, and Amazon Instant Video has a tremendous library of pay-per-view or electronic sell-through to own. And it's a certain type of consumer that wants to own it. It's not a huge, you know, part of the consumer population, but, you know, on Cobble Cord, for instance, one of the content profiles that are featured is, I need to own it. I sleep better at night knowing that I own my content. So that's just one way to consume, one way to get the content you want. You don't want to necessarily pay a monthly subscription. You want that flexibility of a one-off here and there. So.
Yeah. Campbell, and something that you wrote to me was how content is king, but data is queen.
Yeah,
I think you're fitting more in the queen role today.
Yeah, I'm queen.
You can be queen for a day, so how's that?
Yeah,
So
no.
maybe you can explain what you mean by that and how what you're doing over at Adobe is.
Yeah,
Look
sure.
at
So
that.
the point I was trying to make is that media companies that use consumer data in non-PII ways and ways that consumers are okay with, companies that use data about their audiences are the ones that are going to win. People that understand what consumers are watching and understand what consumers want and are able to sift through all their data and make meaningful connections for content programming choices, for recommendations, for actual content development. So what's the next show that I'm going to develop? Those are the types of companies that are going to win. So you're starting to see really sophisticated companies, really sophisticated uses of data. CBS is one. They're one of the most amazing ad tech users out there, that really on the leading edge. And then there's other companies that are really far behind. And there's a whole spectrum in the middle.
Can you mention one of the companies that are falling way behind?
I'd rather not, but
You could all target them later as potential clients, I suppose.
sure. But there's a lot of confusion and FUD, and people are trying to figure it out. But one area where there's a glaring weakness from a consumer's perspective is in TV Everywhere, where you have to sit through the ads and watch the same ad over and over and over again. So I was binging Better Call Saul, and this is a couple months ago, and it wasn't available through streaming, it wasn't available on demand, so you could only watch it in TV Everywhere. And I had to sit through and watch 8 of the same ads over and over and over again. It's okay if you show me 8 ads. I recognize that there's a consumer trade-off. You show me ads, I get the program for free. Don't show me the same ads over and over and over again. And then there's buffering, there's dropped frames, the transitions are terrible. It's an awful consumer experience. So that's one area where we think the media companies really need to improve.
Now, TV Everywhere, I did not talk about them in my introduction because there hasn't been any real changes. It has not taken off, and that's certainly one of the reasons why, maybe one of the primary reasons why it still remains sort of an orphan out there that, has potential. And
Yeah, I think,
There's a lot of teachers used to say about me. But
Yeah, I mean, so it's at about 17% of U.S. households are using it regularly. And we think that one of the reasons that we haven't seen more adoption is that consumers don't want 19 apps. They want one app to get all of this content, or they want 3. They're willing to do the Comcast app, the Netflix app, and Hulu, for example. Like, that's 3, and even that is a lot for a lot of people. They don't want 72 TV Everywhere apps. That just doesn't work.
Well, that sort of leads into a proceeding, and not that we're going to get too government wonky here, hopefully not, but a proceeding that the FCC has been having concerning a transition for what was known as cable card, which was an effort to allow people to buy their own set-top box and plop the card in and not have to be beholden to the MSO to pay a monthly fee to rent their boxes, even though there was some limitations on the service for security reasons in terms of pay cable channels, et cetera. But now they've had a proceeding going on. Are people familiar at all with what's been happening there? Okay, there's some nodding of heads, and but not uniform. So we'll talk more about that. But Tom Wheeler, who's the chairman of the FCC, has been really pushing hard to try to find an alternative where where the systems will somehow be integrated so that no matter what device you decide to use, you'll be able to access the programming that you're subscribing to. And there's been a lot of pressure back and forth. The latest iteration, which originally I thought came from the cable operators, and in fact I think also from some of the studios and networks, was an app-based approach where there would be a single unifying app, but then each program environment would still be housed within their own app, sort of like a compelled, for those who didn't want a set-top box, TV Everywhere sort of world. And nothing has really happened yet for a variety of reasons, but what are all your views about what the FCC has been trying to do? What do you think is best for the consumer? Do you think something's going to happen there?
Well, I had the honor of getting a letter from Mr. Wheeler saying, "Dear Robin, we'd like you to participate in this committee." So that was the early part, not the current part, but nonetheless it was the lead into where we got to here. So we talked with a bunch of MVPDs, mostly, and some CE companies, Vizio, Samsung, and AT&T, DirecTV, Dish was there, Charter, Cablevision, a few others. It was very much on a technical plane of what can we achieve from security and apps. And we started going in a direction of the app model. I pointed out that don't be careful for what you wish for, because of actually the issue that you pointed out. Having 50 apps is not exactly going to make everybody happy in the end, or 100 apps, because if you look at it, some MVPTs actually have 3 apps at least. Their Anywhere product, their Live product, and maybe some other quasi product or home control product. So already there's a huge proliferation. So and the MVPDs, I think, to skip forward to the recent history, are all rushing to prove to the FCC they have all these lovely apps ready. And I'm sure we'll have 500 apps and nothing on. Maybe not nothing on, but we'll have 500 apps and a lot of silos and deep linking, which is kind of a bit of a false description. It usually goes one way or half a way and doesn't go back the way. It's kind of like a browser with the back button broken and the history file removed. And the links don't always go to where you think they're going. So that's deep linking. Anyway.
Yeah, before you do it, just a quick comment. That sort of brings to mind, and maybe it depends on your age group too, but a lot of people, maybe my age group, there's a lot of channel surfing that you still do. And if you're in that environment, you're not going to be able to do that other than programming that might be on demand in that particular app.
Yeah, so 10 clicks to the next channel.
So, yeah, I mean, for a linear program viewing, that's going to be a potential obstacle. We're going to save questions for the end.
This is a relevant question.
Well,
I would like to come can comment also on the other aspect of the FCC, which is about the.
By the way, before you speak then, since Raj has already taken this panel over, can you please identify yourself?
Sure, I'm Pablo Argon. I work for Ericsson.
Okay. Now, please continue.
So I would like if Robin can comment also on the other part of the FCC ruling, which is the aggregated search part of it, which I think is
Yeah.
related.
Yeah. Well, that's the way of fixing the app, potentially fixing the app problem. So that is in a probably about to be in a legal stalemate in terms of rights, ownership of metadata, and ability to share metadata.
We weren't supposed to use the word metadata.
Oh, sorry.
Remember? Jargon-free.
Give me a quick-
Jargon-free zone.
Well, we already had IoT up here,
Descriptive
so-
information or,
LOL.
yeah, so that one is, there's going to be huge legal challenges on that one, I think, as much as there will be on just the video streams themselves.
I think what nobody's really talking about is the fact that when you look at what's happened in this whole FCC ruling, the people who own the set-top boxes now do not want to lose the revenue that is generating. So the reality here is you're going to be stuck with your set-top boxes as long as you're not cutting the cord. And for those who keep it, yeah, you're switching channels, and there are still going to be hundreds and hundreds of apps that are going to be produced. But I think that the cable companies, the average life of a set-top box is about 7 years. The reality here is that if you look at the top players in the business, the Arises of the world, the Technicolors in the world, they don't want that to go away. It's too valuable a business, so nothing's going to happen. And those are the people that are truly pressuring Mr. Wheeler to back off from his initial position. Now that that's already happened, the reality is sure, we can talk about search, we can talk about, I won't say metadata again, but the reality is that will take years and years and years. So what is the interim step? The interim step is how do you refresh the pre-existing infrastructure that exists right now? So a lot of my conversations, without going into names and companies, is how do we create a better experience as opposed to just dialing in number 10 or number 12, and how does the UI on a set-top box ultimately get refreshed? So what you're seeing now is a proliferation of companies that are looking at everything from a Roku box to an Android-based set device. And then it's about going back to the usual. Here's a platform. What vendors do I need to ultimately create a great experience? And that's what's exciting. Like, thank goodness we're going to refresh. And who benefits? It's the consumer. Who loses? It's the cost of getting it done, for most of the big companies.
Alex, I do want to just add that the FCC is not going to go away on this issue, and what brought it into sharp focus was the fact that $20 billion plus in revenue stream for additional outlets, set-top box rentals, and so on. It's a pretty lucrative stream, but consumers have really pushed the issue, and that's really what it's brought it to the forefront. So
I don't necessarily agree that,
Yeah, I don't
the
agree with that
FCC is
either.
never going to back off. They're certainly not backing off in the next 4 years
Yeah.
because of our next president. So the Wheeler policy is likely to continue
Yeah.
under a Clinton administration. It might change thereafter. We'll
You heard it here
see.
But
first.
to the point,
That's a foregone
But to your
conclusion. I
other
mean, that's
point,
a-
there is some research. The average screens in a U.S. home now is around 8. And how many of those are set-top boxes versus tablets or a Roku streaming player or an integrated smart
Yeah, no, I'm
TV?
talking about a smart TV that's obviously linked to a box. But, I mean, look, what we focus on is building up. When we get clients coming to us, and these are large, cable companies, their big issue is I need to get across all these devices. I don't have something that can get me across them. So the hurdle that the average company has right now is I've overspent on an OTT strategy, on a TV authentication strategy. We need to get across all these devices, and we need something that doesn't die off in 6 months. We need something that lives and breathes. So the biggest problem with our current infrastructure is you have vendors cobbled on top of each other, an infrastructure which doesn't speak to each other very well. So, the reason why we always have problems even with our apps is because when you look at it and the complexity involved behind, it's not very fluid is the reality of it. And we're all competing in this space and we all work with each other independently, but the reality is it is complex. And I just don't see the traditional model of the box is still, I think, it is such a valuable business, and I just
Yeah.
don't see somebody pulling the plug on that.
I
very
mean, I
quickly.
think also that the whole premise for doing this supposedly is to foster competition and have everyone on an even playing field. I say there is competition. You don't need to have cable. The consumer has control. You could just say no and get all of your entertainment over the top. So it's not that there are no choices for consumers. And by the way, set-top box fees are the least of the cable operators' problems. That's only a small portion of the monthly bill. It's like 10 to 15%. So, I mean, and
But it's a huge cash flow revenue.
it certainly is,
When
but
you
I'm
add up
saying
all the
it's not
subscribers. Yeah.
not where the consumer angst is coming from primarily.
Well, it depends how complex they become, and if you're adding in the DVRs, and the whole house DVRs, and
Right.
it's $40 a month for that.
It's significant. It's a
Can be.
tax. It's a tax, and consumers.
Well,
are
it's not a
fighting
tax
it.
because actually they leverage, it's like the old telephone model. Obviously, still some cellular services provide that model where you're paying only $100 and then you're paying like a monthly fee, or you're adding it to your subscription, as opposed to paying $750 for the phone up front. So I don't know if I'd call it a tax per se. It's just,
I use the term tax loosely, okay?
Okay.
It's to the consumer, I got my bill, and I'm paying $10 for this box, and I'm paying $18 for this box, and $10 for that third box. Well, it's more than 10%, and I just got the low level
On
of
average,
service, and I
yeah.
have a DVR. So, and I say, what's with all this equipment tax that I'm paying? And that's the way I use the term. I don't mean the government, although I'm sure they'd love to get a piece of that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the
They do.
reality. Yeah, I mean, to me, the reality of the market is right now we're going to have this beautiful 36-month sort of gold rush of OTT services. So companies like Adobe and mine love it because everybody's knocking on the door and they're going, create another app for me, build me a new platform. Fabulous, terrific. Guess what? There's going to be churn. You're already seeing our, services that are falling apart that are backed by big, powerful companies. Why? Because
can you give some examples of those?
Hulu dropping ad supported.
Or in Canada, Show Me, Rogers just fell completely wayside. I mean, that was a big initiative, huge dollars spent there. I mean, it's already happening. My point is, I still believe in the superfan model. I still think content companies can go after somebody who's willing to pay that premium dollar and is involved in an experience where they're spending ultimately thousands of dollars, through different means. And 50 to 100,000, you look at what Chernon's group has done, Full Screen, all these companies. Those guys are all being rolled up into AT&T's new service, and we've all read the press. They're going after the millennials there, but their way of keeping them in the loop is by keeping it trendy. But we have a big problem. We have the fractionalization of content rights. We've got a really messed up advertising model that still is being perfected, and it's being fragmented as we, add new consoles, new devices, etc. So we're living in a fascinating time. I think, look, the consumer benefits overall. The reality is that technology is growing at such a fast pace that keeping up the maintenance of technology and what big companies have to go through to adequately maintain these products seamlessly is very, very difficult. So we spend a lot of time hopefully guiding, a strategy around that, and that's not obvious anymore.
But I think that the marketplace will take care of that. I mean, you see on Roku.
What marketplace? What do you mean by that?
Well, that consumers are utilizing like Time Warner apps and Spectrum apps on Roku, for instance, are among the most used apps on Roku, channels on Roku. So if the distributors, the MVPDs, are seeing that that's where the consumers are going to migrate to in terms of usage, it's a natural progression for them to place that there, and it'll save them money because the less set-top boxes they have out there
That's true.
that are required, it's a cost savings for
You're
them.
forgetting what they're charging the consumer for each set-top box, and they're making a lot of money off of it. That's the problem, and it's very valuable, that business right now.
$20 billion.
And there are only a few companies that manufacture those that, have a strong interest in the status quo, too.
Of course.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Oh, yeah.
And
Why not? It's
they're
why
all
not
in
it's
terminal
happening.
decline, by the way.
Yeah.
And
So if you look at their stock prices, look at their growth rates, it's all negative. Like that space right now is depressing if you're an investor.
And we actually, at Nevelex, we built a proof of concept that was used by our client to present to the FCC that solved a lot of these issues. And that's why I point to the 8 screens per household on various devices. and offered a uniform interface and ability for a consumer to do the same thing on each one of those devices in a home.
But I would disagree that, and I'm sure it was a fixed UI. I believe in a front-end UI that can be manipulated in real time using data. So where I think we're headed is a model where advertising can live happily, where content can live happily, and where ultimately the programmer can program each screen individually. This is about a specific demo on a specific device in a specific geographic region, and that's what I think we're headed towards ultimately. A very powerful model that works.
So Dan, just to clarify then, what Alex just described is a lot of like dynamic personalization, but I guess you would still have to start from some basic, screen until it learns or understands, and you would add input
No.
and viewing, or-
We have a platform that works seamlessly across all the different devices, and we have pre-built templates that render and know how to basically work with every screen that you're talking about.
And-
So that's the uniqueness of the proposition there, at least. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Consistent look and feel.
Yes, or can be manipulated by the specific device that you're going after. So if I'm seeing that I'm not having engagement on a specific Android device, I can try and change it. So try and, maybe you want to accentuate a new program that's coming up, and so you change the template. You create a different environment.
So I guess I misunderstood. So it's not really personalized in terms of the viewer as much as trying to make sure that it's consistent or it's going to work or be optimized on a device basis.
It allows the content holder, the studio, whoever's manipulating that environment to optimize it in real time, which is exciting.
So speaking of, although I'm the one who spoke about it, but speaking of personalization, we talked before, Campbell, about the ties that Adobe has obviously with Omniture and also your relationship with Nielsen, and how that data and those alliances somehow get into what you do to facilitate, recommendations, references. How does it help the consumer? And also you alluded to how, and maybe it wasn't directly with what you're doing, but how it could even guide production creation going forward. Type of stuff,
Sure.
too.
So Omniture came from Omniture was an acquisition that Adobe made in 2009. It's the largest web and video analytics platform in the world. And the more data you have, the more targeted you can get with your recommendations. The more targeted you can get with your advertising. The more information you have about your audience, the better the decisions you can make about monetization, about content, about all those things. Although there's been a lot of pushback among the studios about using data to create content, and the myth of Netflix, where House of Cards was, so the myth is that Amazon used data to figure out exactly.
You mean Netflix?
Netflix
Yeah.
used, sorry, what is that?
You said
Said
Amazon.
Amazon.
Oh, sorry. Netflix used data. The myth is they used data to figure out exactly what people wanted. House of Cards had been being shopped around Hollywood for
Right.
2 or 3 years, and no one was biting on this thing. It had nothing to do with
But
data.
did they have the cast when they shopped it, though? Because at least I thought one of the reasons was Kevin Spacey had, scored very well in terms of their analysis of other shows and things like that, so.
That's a good question. So it was shopped without Spacey being attached to it? It was only until?
I don't know,
Yeah.
I don't know the answer.
But companies using data could say,
Right.
before that had been shopped to 9 other distributors, they could say, we know this is going to be a hit. And Netflix is way ahead of the curve in terms of using data. And their recommendations are phenomenal. Like you compare that to one of the big differences between Netflix and HBO is that HBO is pushing you to watch what they want you to watch. They want you to watch the new Westworld, whether or not you've ever watched sci-fi. That's what's going to be in the leaderboard. Netflix sticks in the leaderboard Luke Cage because they know I just watched Daredevil. I mean, that's really obvious, but they're
Also
just
because it's a new show that they're promoting as well.
yeah, absolutely. But it's a new one that
They're
they know I'm going to
But
like.
they're curating as well.
They're not showing
Extend
shows
your
for
balance.
women in my profile. So, and in terms of Nielsen, so we do have a partnership with them. That's just pulling in Nielsen data, pulling in ratings data into your analytics instant, and using that as one more data point
And your
for monetization.
recommendations or?
And recommendations as well. Although the recommendations aren't based on Nielsen ratings, it's
Okay.
based on viewer profiles and what they've actually done. The thorny thing is making recommendations across different providers, so because ABC doesn't want you using their data to make recommendations in NBC's app. So that's something that we have to navigate.
Yeah.
Yeah, TK, did you want to say something, or?
No, I'm scratching my head.
Oh, okay. All right, well, you looked very thoughtful doing that.
But I am wondering though, about, you were bringing up, part of the problems of silos. Now, to me, and if you again go back to the basic premise of what home entertainment was in the beginning, it was a way to give consumers the ultimate in choice. I can watch whatever I want when I want. It would be great to have an app right now where I could call up any movie or describe any movie, the best car chase scene, the most romantic kiss, something like that, a really unique search term, and find it anywhere. It's streaming on Netflix. It is available on Hulu. You can buy it only on Blu-ray disc, but it's out of print right now, but here's a list of stores that might have it. Something that is that specific, that I can find any content at any time. But that can't, such an app is, in my mind, it's impossible because you have all these silos. I mean, Netflix would never give you access to what they have because they don't want you, they want you coming into Netflix, but they don't want you going back out.
I mean, there are a few apps and websites out there that do a degree of what you're explaining. So Yidio, for instance, where you can search on a piece of content and they'll tell you amongst like 35 different OTT providers where you can find it.
Right.
Amazon is a big repository because it also has the DVD angle there too, so you can get it there. So you're right, it's not seamless, it's not easy. The consumer has to go to quite a few places to get that
I mean, like, for example,
information.
we were watching How to Get Away with Murder, and I got hooked on that show. But I had to do all my own searching through actually going to these different platforms. So I ended up watching season 1 on Netflix, then going to Amazon for the first few episodes of season 2 and buying them.
Right.
And then, I caught up, and they didn't have the brand new one, so then I had to go to Hulu and pay even more for them.
But
So
that's
I-
never going to change because that's the fundamental problem. There is fractionalized distribution rights and windows in the way the studios or television production companies actually sell their rights to individual streaming
Right.
services or to content companies. I just don't see that changing in the near future unless they want to retain complete control and it's their own ecosystem. I
Yeah.
mean, I just don't see that changing.
Yeah, but it'd be so nice to have that kind of
It'd be
app that
great.
would've
I
done
think it's
this
a
homework
dream.
for me.
I mean, I really
It would
think
be
it's a
nice,
dream.
but
Yeah.
also you could look at it as a positive, that you are taking control of your entertainment, you're becoming more knowledgeable, you're searching, you're becoming
Through
more...
manual discovery.
But you're
Yeah.
paying more out of your pocket to do
Well,
what
it-
TK was
possibly.
describing.
Possibly not.
But the
Yeah,
other thing
in
is,
some respects.
in the time it took me to figure all this stuff out, I could have watched a whole other movie or a whole other show, which would have given the studios more eyeballs on their
right.
content.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a long way to go and ways to make it easier. But I think that the onus is a bit now on the consumer, and some, obviously they don't always want it, but it's, it's there for the taking.
So we have 15 minutes left, and I have some more questions I could ask, but I thought if there were additional questions, and please identify yourself, sir.
Raj Samtani.
Can you speak louder, too? So,
Sorry, Raj Samtani, been in the content protection space for quite a while. So, do we ever see a time when you're going to have sort of this federation of data that seems to be required to get these kind of things to come to pass? I mean, do you ever see somebody stepping in to be a super sort of data aggregator? I know we've got companies that do that today in limited instance with companies like RentTrack as an example, and others that do some of that.
I mean, the closest to me you're going to get is companies in the recommendation space that have anonymized metadata that are working individually with companies like Think Analytics. I mean, like, it all comes down to who do you have a contract with and what data can I use and what contractually can I use. And you know damn well that every recommendation company has an anonymized meta store. So they're going to optimize that data to make it work as best they can. I mean, to me, that's the way. I do not see this happening in the near future. The closest you're going to come is today it would be sitting on my Amazon Fire and it recommending across the Netflix, just by search, just making search powerful within the ecosystem and the contractual deals that they have done on that device. Nothing more.
And they're still going to do a handshake and a send-off once you
Yeah.
look for. We built Nevelex. We built a content discovery app with the idea of by title, by actor, by genre, that kind of, put all the basic measurements in there. Where can you get it all? And but at the end of the day, I can't get past Netflix firewall, so all I can do is handshake it and hand it off to Netflix and Hulu and Amazon.
If there is a company that's in a great position to pull it off, it's Adobe, because we sit on top of all of the data.
That's probably
And we're
true.
not
That's very
despised in the industry.
Yeah.
We don't take a position in the media. We're not a company called Google, so our clients trust us generally.
that app for me.
It's a matter of getting them to trust each other. We do have a data co-op initiative, and it's fraught with difficulties getting these guys to cooperate with each other.
Obviously, everybody sort of views data, it's not just data as queen, but it's also power. And centralized data and being the depository of all that information is
I would agree with
superpower.
that.
Yeah, but bear in mind, you have smaller services out there. What we're seeing is a proliferation of companies that have hundreds of titles, not thousands of titles. So search, look, I used to be in the recommendation business. Search only works if you've got enough actual, content to play around with. And the reality is the premium services like HBO don't really need that at this point. The smaller companies, they can push it in a way that it's done well enough that the average person's not going to complain. And so, it's very much dependent upon the environment that you're talking about. So each use case is very specific to how you're going to approach it.
Another question, first the gentleman, then the young lady.
So, I heard a suggestion.
Name yourself, please, or tell us who you
Jason
are.
Anderson, I'm from Dish Network.
Okay.
But I'm very fascinated by this question that Ms. Giuliano raised. You said Yidio is one way to search across a lot of APIs, including Netflix, which, you can scrape that API. But as you mentioned, it only hits the first 35 or so, and there's thousands of other providers. So my question, I'm just curious, what are you guys using? If you go out today and say, I really want to see, it's Halloween, I want to see the 1979 Dracula, starring Frank Langella. What app do you use and you told us that you just went to each of them you could think of and searched them.
Well,
But
I began by doing a Google search.
Right.
Right. I mean, what
Yeah.
do you use? You said Yidio.
I use Google a lot, and also IMDb has a pretty good selection. It's not every, because it's owned by Amazon, so they don't have everyone in there. But Go Watch It is another good app that you can search. I don't know the numbers, but I start with the ones that I already pay for. I'll look at my Netflix account first. I'll look at Amazon Prime. So I'll start there, and if it's not there, then I'll do some more research. That's how. And
I just use Pirate Bay. Is that? No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
By the way, as part of the only other Better Call Saul fan in this room, it was on Netflix. No ads.
No.
Yeah.
Awesome. This was in the window. This was before it had been released.
Oh, okay.
by the way,
That's
Roku
why.
has a very good universal search system. I mean, it's not perfect, but
It's the first 50.
yeah,
So
yeah.
It's
there's
it's limited in my
And
mind.
that's
They're
such a
using
limited
MGO?
standardization.
Aren't they
That's
using
right.
MGO?
I don't know.
I think Roku's using MGO as their search and recommendation, I
Okay.
believe.
I don't know.
I don't see where the big problem is. I mean, I think we overthink. People are smart. They will Google. They'll find where they have to go to now. And I think it's part of our behavioral. I mean, we understand that there are still some annoying steps as part of this process, but we eventually get to either the app, and you can watch it for free, or you're going to pay for it, and you're going to choose the option you want. I don't think people have a problem getting to the content that they need to get to. The question is, you're looking at it from a perspective of churn, of how much are they consuming, when are they stopping, when are they starting? I mean, you want to know as much as possible. And I think overall, I mean, we're doing pretty well, and each service, I understand there's always room for improvement, but the reality is that there's a really good set of data that's out there, whether it's sitting with Adobe, whether it's sitting with the recommendation systems. We have something that's pre-built. If I do an SVOD service with films, I have something that's pre-built because they don't want to pay the OVP for a recommendation engine. The point is, the big client does not want to spend a lot of money with Think Analytics. They either have bought the company or they're using something that's rather rudimentary but works well enough that it's going to engage. And that's the end of the story. That is the commercial model right now. It may change, but not for the near future, is my point.
See,
All
I
right.
would beg to differ and tell you that I think the consumer is woefully underutilizing the tools necessary to really find content. I don't think it's an issue that's anywhere near being solved. And just talk to your relatives, you know, go in different age groups and TV anywhere. TV everywhere. I mean, I've had conversations with what
the
they
heck
don't
is
even,
that?
yeah,
I know.
exactly. They don't have a
I
clue.
know.
The other interesting thing, though, that you bring up is that I think a lot of us are trained to think about it from a show or, you know, a piece of content point of view. I mean, and that's how we think a lot. But, you know, Cobblecord is trying to come at it from a different point of view, since there are already, you know, you can search on various other services for a piece of content, but it's like, it talks about your content, your device, your internet, and your price range that you want to sort of pull together, and it kind of recommends OTT services based on those things, and it's coming at it from the other side. So it's not, it's sort of decentralizing in a way from the shows themselves.
Question over here?
You know,
And
when
please
Net-
identify yourself.
I'm Stephanie Crane from Home Media Magazine, editor-in-chief.
Plant.
When Netflix first started out, it was all about their recommendation engine, and they thought that was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And now you hardly ever hear them talk about it at Netflix. And just as personal experience, my mother watched one drama on Netflix, and all of a sudden they're throwing her every drama under the sun, and she's like, I would like to watch something other than drama. And, you know, sometimes Netflix is using actual human beings to kind of curate things. I mean, what really is the possibility for data to read what I'm gonna wanna watch?
Oh, there's a huge possibility there. The point is that Netflix has a homegrown recommendation system. Bottom line is they ended up, if you remember way back, they ran a $1 million competition to
Yes.
build a recommendation system. They are basically using that, and they have agreed, and this is like certain companies, when it's homegrown, they come to an agreement internally that if I'm able to up consumption by X percent, and let's just call it 6 to 8% is a pretty damn good number if you can get there, is fantastic. And guess what? They're sticking with that. Not much is going to change at this point. There are some people who will come and sit in front of you and say, oh, you'll see 30% improvement in terms of engagement. It's a crock half the time. I mean, anybody who throws a number, it's just not for real. But what is for real is that if you really look at the recommendation space and understand the depth with which you can actually, you know, conjure up programming that is going to be viable for you, absolutely. Like the point is, you don't need more than 3 boxes. As a human, the reality is 3 choices is more than enough. And then it moves up. There's the cold start, where I've just arrived on the site. How do they know what I like? And that through a couple of touches, typically they can give you something that's going to be close enough. And then typically they're in the 3 boxes. One is the obvious. The second is something that's actually it may be the continuation of the series. But the third is actually is something that you would go, oh, I don't know why I would like that. But the reality is data has actually found that, you know, there's maybe a 20% percentage actually there that you are going to engage with that.
Right.
So there is a method to the madness. The reality is that it's not that great, and most of us complain about the search and recommendation engines because they're not always that great, you know? It's
But
like-
don't forget, all of these guys they're starting with the algorithm-driven approach, but they're layering on top of it a curation approach. So
Not all of them.
Most of them, yeah.
Some are. It's like Pandora versus Spotify. There's not always a human involved. There's some are
Well,
curated by humans. Most are not, actually.
Actually, I would beg to differ. On the Showtime side, when we launched the
Yeah.
OTT service, I mean, those were very specific conversations, and they carve out certain areas to, you know.
You have a limited catalog there.
Well, it wasn't just.
What were the human
Showtime.
recommendations based on?
It was based
what Showtime
on-
wanted you to watch?
It was
Or-
based on what the service felt was something that they wanted to call out to their subscribers that they may not be aware of, and, you know, the marketing agreements, quite frankly, so.
Marketing agreements. We have a few minutes left. Another question? And, well, I don't see another question, so I have a question for all of you, and maybe this might be the wrapping it up. And you've heard this question before, I use it a lot to wrap up, but, you know, as we sit here a year from now, what do you think is going to change? And what do you think might be a big development in the next year, if it's possible to project that? Other than Adobe becoming the centralized data source. Thoughts? Tom, you're at 50,000 feet.
You know, I've been predicting Netflix fatigue setting in for some time, but it hasn't happened. Netflix conquered the U.S., and just when we thought they couldn't grow anymore, they said, "Hey, there's the rest of the world."
But that's a leading indicator for Netflix. I mean, if you stay domestic on that thought, I mean, international side, it's still a novelty in a lot of places globally.
Right.
In the United States, they've been aggressive. This is their first aggressive market they went after. They have topped out in the United States, and churn is now working against them.
Right.
Well, they
And-
did
and-
still
and-
have growth in their report, but clearly
But
it was the international. Well, but
It
there was
wasn't
still
domestic.
domestic growth too.
But they're fighting.
But yeah, I
But they're
understand
fighting. But each time they're fighting the onset of fatigue with something pretty innovative. You know, first it was going to original. Well, first it was to spending more money and not just buying the schlock 1979 B movies.
That's right.
Then it was buying better movies.
Right.
Then it was creating original content, and now it's using data analytics to formulate that content, which probably didn't happen in the House of Cards days, but sure as hell is happening now. The next step, I think we're going to start, if they are successful in predicting what the consumer wants to see and creating almost content on demand, the type of content consumers want to watch, I think that's going to be a huge deal that is going to go beyond Netflix and that you're going to see other people start using too.
Any other thoughts?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, a year from now, I think we're going to see a lot more usage of Siri, Alexa, and Google Home to navigate video. In addition to, you know, the Xfinity one is saying to Alexa, what should I watch? Or I think that the days of saying what's on are over, unless it's what is the baseball game on. Live is the only use case for what's on. The rest is what should I watch, or turn on House of Cards, or turn on Luke Cage.
Although you might ask Alexa, what's on? Too. So
Yeah.
she'll-
She'll say, I don't know.
Well,
I'm confused. Too many silos.
maybe, I
I
don't
want
know.
to get to the content.
I've had a pretty good relationship with my Alexa, so, but I haven't checked that piece yet, so.
I would say that the social networks getting in the video business is a big deal. That's going to, you know, even accelerate.
Twitter?
Twitter, Facebook Live, Snapchat, experimenting. They have huge, you know, customer base, a lot of engagement, and a ton of data on these users.
Yeah.
It's a
No,
very,
you're right.
very powerful combination. So I think that that's going to be a big development.
I think in the next year, you're going to see the continued proliferation of hybrid set-top boxes. Comcast is now adding Netflix, so that was a big move for them, and I'm very hopeful that the other MVPDs will continue to add OTT services, and that the consumer, which now owns an average, I think, of 2.5 it was a funky number that came up, but they're getting up to 3 with owning Amazon and Netflix and Hulu. It would be great to see a second tier start to proliferate, and that MVPDs give that opportunity to let that happen in one neat little box that I can see my linear and I can see those services. Nice, tidy little package.
It's Muhammad going to the mountain as opposed to.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, at least Comcast with the Netflix deal, okay, they're conceding, they could either become a cord cutter,
Right.
or they could say, you know, if I'm gonna lose business, I'll lose it to myself, and go ahead, go to Netflix through my box,
Right.
which I can continue to poke and prod you with, and say, come to my stuff that I really want you to go
Which
to.
still reinforces you staying where you are, you
Yeah.
still also have the broadband connection,
Exactly.
and what I said about JD Power and cord stacking, where that hybrid is basically a cord stacking, but it's naturally built in rather than having to go to 2 places for it, so
That's right.
there's an advantage there.
I'd like to see an evolution of the AVOD model. So getting away from the boring old pre-roll, mid-roll, and really taking advantage of, selfishly the UI and how we can go back to models where even in the old days it was a Colgate Presents hour. There's no reason why you can't get a premium CPM in association with data and a really flexible UI to give you ultimately a subscription model which has none of the annoyance of the advertising, but it's pre-integrated as part of the UI layer, and I'm excited about that.
No, I think we hopefully will make some improvements on the issue you brought up, and I was going to bring up, which is the diabolical quality of service of ad technology today, and it's not necessarily because of technology. All the parts are there. It's just executed in such a horrible manner. I totally echo your thoughts. So there's no excuse for it. I think people are going to, operators or owners or OVPs are going to learn how to do it better because of the consumer rejection of I mean, I go to pirate sites because even if I have a paid for subscription to something I really want to watch because I cannot stand the broken ad technology.
But you're going there for research purposes as part of your DRM role.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
This is being
We
streamed,
understand.
Robin.
Just checking it was
Right.
QAing the
who was
DRM.
there. I didn't watch it. I just read the metadata that suggested it was there.
We understand.
Metadata.
Well, I think that might be the last word on this subject before anybody puts their feet in their mouth, including myself. But please join me in thanking the panel for their participation, and thank you all for attending here and around the world. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you. Got a little heated. It's good.